Mr. Lakshmi Kumaran, our moderator, distinguished guests, my esteemed panelists on the dais, and distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great privilege to participate in this IP Global Convention 2014 on the important subject of optimizing the economic value of innovation and IPRs in the global market. I think it's a very, very interesting and a very topical subject which has many facets. But I would first of all like to thank Dr. Agarwal and all the sponsors for inviting me to share my views with this August Assembly. I will try to stick very closely to the topic of this session, also the guidance that has been given to us by our moderator. And what I would like to do is to touch on three distinct facets of this theme. I would like to give you a broad overview of how in the global setting innovation and intellectual property is shown to have added immense value in all fields of technology and in all fields of arts and culture. Secondly, how do enterprises and institutions, universities, add that value? And thirdly, and that is perhaps both in the Indian context and in the global context, what do we need to do precisely in order to create that ecosystem which will encourage first the creation of assets, then the protection and management, and then finally commercialization and turning them into products, services, technologies, solutions. I think this is the whole raison d'etre of intellectual property. Now, I need not go too much into how knowledge has become the most important factor of production in today's knowledge-based economies. And we have innovation, technologies, creativity, innovative business management, all spurred by intellectual property, by intellectual assets, by innovative management, and their utilization. And this is what is adding more and more value to enterprises and to the world, as well as national economies. More value is being added by intangible assets compared to tangible assets. If we take the Western world, developed economies, almost 80% of the value is added by intangible assets, which are knowledge-based and where intellectual property plays a considerable part. There are other ecosystems also of innovation. Intellectual property is not the only one, but I think intellectual property plays certainly a very important and a very decisive part. Let me quote, I don't know whether this has already been given in the inaugural session, but we have the latest study coming from the European Patent Office and OHIM in Alicante, giving us an overview of the value addition in European Union. It has been estimated that the IPR intensive industries in European Union generated almost 39% of total GDP in European Union, 39%. Euros. The patent-intensive industries alone were responsible for 14% of that GDP. As far as employment is concerned, 26% of all employment in European Union comes from IPR-intensive industries. And if we take also the indirect jobs, the percentage balloons to something like 35%. As far as exports, trade is concerned, again, the value in the European Union is as high as 80 to 90%. So that's the value, the optimization of intellectual property in one very developed market. It's the same in USA. And last time when I was attending this conference, Dr. Agarwal had mentioned that in the USA, these technology industries are creating 35% of the value of the US GDP. What is happening in the field of copyright and creative industries? Here there have been a large number of studies. There is a methodology which was perfected by the World Intellectual Property Organization. Most of the countries are using that methodology, and therefore you can compare apple to apple and oranges to oranges, wherever you use that methodology to assess the economic contribution of copyright-based industries. And all over the world, in more than 40 countries, the value comes something between 4% to 10% of the GDP, a huge number in terms of monetary value. In terms of employment, again, something like 5 to 8%, and a sizable contribution to exports. No such study, unfortunately, has been done in India. I've been a great advocate of such a study in India, but for some reason or the other, because the importance of this subject is not yet been appreciated, and I don't know why, because we are such a rich country as far as copyright-based industries are concerned. We have the biggest motion picture industries, a very big music industry, entertainment industry, we have a big software industry, we have a big publishing industry, and I think our numbers will come out very robust. And when that comes out, it's not only a question of numbers, it's a question that then the policymakers take stock of those numbers, and then they try to promote more intellectual creativity. Take, for example, trademarks, and we have from WIPO our expert from trademarks who would have talked about it. But the technology brands like Apple and Google have now overtaken those brands which used to be the leaders, like Coca-Cola, like IBM, like Microsoft. So the technology brands have now, with a value of something like $100 billion insofar as just the brand equity is concerned, have overtaken this. India also is building up in this area. We have Tata's, we have Reliance, we have a number of public sector and other banks where there is a considerable brand equity which is being developed. But this is again an area where in our country we need to do more to preserve and to generate equity value from our trademarks and to have more and more international brands. Let me show you the picture from another perspective. What about the filings of industrial property in the world? And if you see that even despite the downturn in economic and financial markets, the trend of industrial property filings right from 2010, it fell down in 2009, but 2010, 2011, 2012 has overshot the recovery phase. And in fact, it is one of the records in this period of industrial property filing. Also, there is a great dispersal. New countries are coming with very excellent results. China, of course, has now become a leader, but India, the BRICS countries, and some of the Latin American countries, which are developing countries, have made their mark insofar as dispersal of innovation is concerned, which is again a very important factor to note. It is also important because it shows that enterprises and countries which continue to innovate, which continue to R&D, they are better prepared to face the economic downturn? One. Okay. Mr. Kumaran is already pointing out. So let me go to the second aspect, which is, and I think you have already said that, so I will very quickly run through, that the IP may assist enterprises and institutions in almost every aspect of their business. And this may come through licensing, sale, or commercialization of IP-protected products or services. It can enhance the value or worth of enterprises in the eyes of investors. It can be an excellent collateral and security for further expansion of the business. And in cases of acquisition and merger, sometimes this intellectual property plays the most important role. So there are a number of ways, and patent pool was mentioned, which is one of the important areas where innovative and collaborative research can be used to create more value. But let me come to the last point as to what we need to do in India and elsewhere in developing countries to optimize the value from intellectual property. And the first thing that I would like to say, that facilitating and encouraging commercialization of IP assets has to become an integral part of national and corporate strategy. More and more countries are now coming out with their policies and strategies where asset creation and commercialization is an integral part of their economic policy. I think we need to go there. We need to have a national policy and strategy, and we need to have institutional policies, policies in the universities, R&D institutions for this purpose. I think that is the beginning point. In a global context, because the theme talks about global context, I think we must remember the global protection systems, the PCT, the Madrid system, and the Hague system, for protecting our assets all over the world. As far as universities and other academic institutions are concerned, we need to have a new law. What happened by Bayh-Dole law in USA, you are well aware of. It may not be 100% applicable to India. There was a draft act in the parliament, it has been withdrawn, it has gone back to the drawing board, but we need a new law. We need new legislation also on making IP a security and collateral. We have some cases where banks do this, but we don't have an overall framework which exists for making IP a robust collateral and security. Establishment of a system linking grants of IP and giving due recognition. And I'm coming to incentive and award system, which is extremely important. And I was studying